Hey guys, it's NerdGasm with you once again. When I think back, the very first video game console I ever owned as a kid was Sony's PlayStation. Being that I was only like 10, most of the games my brother and I would be playing on it were your standard racing games, maybe a little vehicular combat with twisted metal, some platformers like Crash Bandicoot, and a ton of wrestling, because that's what we were into more than anything else at the time. When it came to horror games, though, these were few and far between. My brother and I didn't really own any, and didn't have much interest in playing them either. Growing up, I completely disregarded one of the more popular horror game franchises, Resident Evil. I knew about it, had heard about it, but I think I had a preconceived idea of what these games were in my head. During my adolescence, in the early to mid-2000s, stories centering around viruses turning people into mindless zombies were everywhere. They had oversaturated movies, television, even video games. Whether or not the quality of said stories were good or bad, I just became desensitized to the idea of zombies altogether, and distanced myself from them as much as I could. Though I had no interest in going back to play the original Resident Evil games on PlayStation, I honestly still don't, sorry to say. I did purchase the remake of Resident Evil 2 in 2019, feeling it was as good a time as any to finally introduce myself to this franchise and explore everything it had to offer, what all the fuss had been about. I felt that playing a remastered version with updated graphics and gameplay was the best way to go, to test the waters, and without beating around the bush with this, I'm just going to go out and say that the remake of Resident Evil 2 is one of my personal favorite video games ever. It blew me away from start to finish. The characters, the atmosphere, the storytelling, all of it is simply phenomenal. After beating RE2, I became fully engrossed in all things Resident Evil. I couldn't get enough of it, and over the next several years, I found myself buying all of the numbered mainline entries in the series on my PlayStation 4, and captured the footage of my playthroughs with the intention of one day reviewing each one of them, sharing my thoughts, opinions, and experiences. I was reluctant to make any videos like this, with the fear that they wouldn't perform well, and honestly, I still don't expect them to. But all of my videos on YouTube have been performing poorly lately, for a few years now, and my channel is in desperate need of something new, and creatively, I want to begin exploring new pastures as well. I need to spice things up. I'm a nerd of many things, not just comics and superheroes, though I will still talk about them too, don't you worry. So, seeing as this is the month of October, the spooky season is in full swing, over the next couple weeks I will be reviewing the Resident Evil games, starting with the remake of the original all the way up to Resident Evil Village that was released last year. Hopefully this will be a fun series of videos that you will all enjoy. Those of you who have never played these games before, a group I found myself in at one point, may be persuaded to do so after watching, and those out there that are die-hard Resident Evil fans who have played every single entry in the series, even the side ones, that know all there is to know about it, may find it interesting to hear the perspective of someone who just got into them in recent years, and one who has never played the originals on PlayStation, to base all these new releases off of. So, without further delay, let's sink our teeth into the first entry of the Resident Evil franchise, Resident Evil, a remake that was initially released on Nintendo's GameCube in 2002, but is now widely available and remastered on various home console stores as well as PC. The story of the first Resident Evil takes place in the summer of 1998, following a string of bizarre murders on the outskirts of the Midwestern town named Raccoon City. The Raccoon City Police Department sent a team of their Special Tactics and Rescue Service, STARS, in to investigate, but contact with the STARS Bravo team is lost, and a second team, Alpha Team, is sent in to find their comrades. They manage to locate Bravo Team's downed helicopter in the woods, having crashed mysteriously in the foothills of the Arclay Mountains. Alpha Team is then attacked by a pack of monstrous dogs, who chase them through the woods until they seek shelter in a nearby abandoned mansion, the Spencer Mansion. The Spencer Mansion is the primary setting of this game, and one of my favorites in the entire Resident Evil series. It has so much history to it, and personality, and a downright chilling atmosphere. Built in the late 1960s, the house and its surrounding cabins and residence buildings acted as the country club for the higher-ups of the Umbrella Corporation, a seemingly peaceful and virtuous international pharmaceutical company. The more you explore and the farther you get into the game, the more you learn about this estate and its darker purpose, hiding the top-secret laboratory complex beneath it, where Umbrella performs twisted genetic and bioorganic research in order to create deadly bioweapons. Umbrella had developed the highly contagious Tyrant virus, or T-virus, a strain of a more ancient and unique progenitor virus. The T-virus alters living and recently deceased organisms, eroding their brains and internal organs, causing extreme hunger in its host to the point of cannibalism. There had been an outbreak of the T-virus at the Spencer Mansion facility leading up to the events of the game, which infected the personnel there, as well as some of the wildlife and animals in the area. By the time you get there, you're witnessing the aftermath. All that remains. In Resident Evil, you take control of one of the surviving members of STARS Alpha Team, either Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield, in search for answers and their allies, and depending on which character you choose, you will have a slightly different gameplay experience. The main narrative isn't changed that much in comparison to later games in the series that would feature multiple playable characters in them, but I still recommend you play through both Jill and Chris's stories just to get the full experience. There are enough differences in them to feel like two separate games, two sides of the same story. Jill and Chris have slightly different stats, with Chris having more health. Jill will always have a lockpick in her inventory that allows her to open locked doors, whereas Chris must find old keys to do so. Chris carries a lighter with him at all times that Jill will need to manually place in her inventory, and both characters carry different amounts of items in their inventory, Chris being locked at 6 and Jill locked at 8. Jill also has an exclusive weapon in the game only she can acquire, the grenade launcher, so fuck yeah she does. Most of us know this by now, but if you'd be so kind to humor me for just a second, Resident Evil is a survival horror game. It focuses on exploration, puzzle solving, and resource management. To progress and uncover all the areas, you need to thoroughly search for, examine, and combine objects, solve intricate puzzles, some of which get pretty damn cryptic, and combat or ideally avoid the variety of monsters that stand in your way. Healing items and ammunition are in finite supply, so is the space within your character's personal inventory, so going in guns blazing and wasting all of your resources will not work for you in this game. You have to think, strategize. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, just that while you're trying to solve it, you're running for your life at the same time, with monsters on your heels and shit filling up your pants. Resident Evil uses tank controls. That is, you control the character in relation to the position of the character in any given area, as opposed to the game's camera itself. And I gotta be honest, compared to the action-oriented, over-the-shoulder gameplay found in the newer games, I'm not a fan of these tank controls, even after playing through this game multiple times and becoming familiar with it. I find them clunky, I find them awkward, and I find them really outdated. However, with all that said, I wouldn't change a thing regarding this game's controls. Later entries in the series, sure, but not the original Resident Evil. I don't like the controls found in this game. My opinion of them borders on hatred, but I think they helped me become even more immersed in the story and my surroundings. Because of the awkward control, my frustrations with it, I never felt like I had an advantage in this game, that I had a firm grasp on my situation. I felt like my back was up against the wall at all times, and I was fighting for my life. I felt uncomfortable, on edge, constantly, that every decision I was making, every bullet I fired, could be my last. I feel like the vibe and intensity of Resident Evil, the first one at least, hinges on these tank controls. They are just another handicap the game forces you to overcome to survive. Though I grew to appreciate the tank controls, despite my dislike of them, there are some other aspects of this game that I still don't enjoy. Unlike later entries in the series, your character's inventory slots do not increase in the original Resident Evil. I mentioned this earlier, with Jill being locked at 8 items and Chris being locked at 6. Now, playing as Jill, this locked inventory didn't bother me that much. It didn't diminish my enjoyment of the game, and I found the slight backtracking to item boxes to manage my inventory to be somewhat satisfying, all things considered. It's a pain in the ass that the in-game map doesn't mark down which items you have interacted with and where, though, if you don't have enough inventory space to pick them up. Same goes for which shaped key you need for which door, even if you have already tried to open it and the game tells you which key is needed for it. That made it difficult for me to plan my route sometimes, but it was still something I could tolerate playing as Jill. Playing as Chris, though, with his limit of 6 inventory slots, it might not seem like that much of a difference, but believe me, it can make playing this game a real chore. I beat the game faster than I did as Jill, seeing as I'd become more familiar with the game's mechanics and layout, but still, the amount of backtracking you need to do with him is insane, unless of course you have memorized the game enough to know exactly which items you need and when, and which keys to use on which doors, which the vast majority of players do not. Removing those 2 extra items from his inventory definitely made Chris's playthrough a lot harder and tedious than Jill's. If you are playing this game for the first time, I highly advise you play as Jill over Chris, because all the backtracking you need to do with him will probably turn you away from it. Something else I really don't like about this game compared to later installments is its save system. In order to save, you have to find safe rooms with typewriters in them, and can only do so if you have an ink ribbon in your inventory. Ink ribbons can be found throughout the game, but there is only a limited supply of them. I think there are a total of 30 when playing on normal, and that number is raised or lowered depending on which difficulty you are playing on. I had plenty left over when playing as both characters, but the fact that you can run out leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. It just feels wrong to me. Now I get why this was implemented. It prevents the player from becoming too comfortable with all these extra saves, but in this day and age, with how busy life has become for some people, having the freedom to save whenever you want is a luxury required in video games. Not everyone can invest as much time into gaming as they want to, can't have sessions that last for hours on end. Because Resident Evil restricts your save usage, challenge, scheduling times to play it, make good chunks of progress, and not waste any precious ink ribbons might prove challenging for some people, especially busy adults. On normal difficulty, it's not that bad, but the accessibility level of playing this one on the harder difficulties is definitely not as high as later RE games would be. Alright, so like I had mentioned, killing enemies and wasting ammo is not advised in this game. Whenever possible, you want to try your best to avoid the monsters trying to violently murder you and eat your remains. But every once in a while, you gotta blow some fucking heads off, which is not only satisfying, but ensures what you killed won't come back with a vengeance later. The regular zombies are bumbling fools, and are easy to maneuver around, but make damn sure that if you down one without removing its head, you use your lighter in combination with some kerosene to set that sumbitch on fire. Because unlike the original version of Resident Evil, this remake introduces a new zombie type called Crimson Heads, which is what downed zombies can transform into if they are left on the ground long enough. I hate these bastards. They are more aggressive and move faster and more erratically than the normal zombies, and being in close proximity to one always gives me the heebie-jeebies. Keep in mind that you will need to keep filling up your canteen with kerosene, and you only get a few burns per refill. Canisters of kerosene are only found in certain areas of the game, and there is a limited supply of it, so you'll have to be selective, know which zombies to barbecue and which to leave alone. Basically ones that are in rooms and hallways you travel through the most. Those are your best bet. Then you've got these humanoid reptile things, the hunters, which I honestly underestimated after I took the first few out with my shotgun. I thought they were all bark and no bite. That is until one of them used a wind-up attack that slit my throat right open. Make sure to interrupt that. And speaking of bark, I hate the fucking dogs in this game. I hate the fucking dogs in all the Resident Evil games. I play right into their hands. They move really fast. I get nervous, fire blindly, waste my ammo. Little shitheads. I wouldn't say I'm scared of dogs, but ones infected with a zombie virus? Those put me on edge. Back off, Cujo. There are chimeras you encounter in some of the labs later in the game. They're a combination of a bunch of different animals. There are giant spiders and an even larger one called the Black Tiger you battle in the underground tunnels. And there is even a massive bioweapon great white shark called Neptune you defeat by draining the Aqua Ring section and electrocuting it in the water. The Aqua Ring is essentially a multi-leveled fish tank. This area wasn't in the original game on the PlayStation, or at least if it was completely revamped and redesigned here. Some of the larger boss encounters in Resident Evil include Yawn, a giant serpent-like creature. I was really tense with this one, because snakes freak me out, especially ones this size. You battle Yawn twice in the game, once in the mansion's attic, and then again in the library, where it finally succumbs to all of its accumulated wounds. They build up Yawn's appearance by having one of the missing STARS members you find being bitten by him, and you needing to find antivenom within a time limit before he succumbs to his wounds. When he mentions this giant snake, I thought he was just losing his mind and exaggerating. How big could it really be? By the way, that's another difference between Chris and Jill's campaign. After saving the injured STARS member, Richard, the rookie medic of Bravo Team, Rebecca Chambers, will help you, healing you when needed. Well, as supplies last, of course. She also helps you get past the piano puzzle in the mansion, playing Moonlight Sonata, because Chris is musically impaired. Jill is able to play it herself. I guess only women know how to play the piano in the Resident Evil universe. During the boss battle against the big mutated plant, Plant 42, in the residence building, you will also need to create the herbicide V-Jolt to weaken it as Rebecca, but only if Richard had not been saved earlier in the game. If you are playing the story as Jill and you create V-Jolt, administering it to Plant 42's roots in the Aqua Ring, you can bypass the boss battle altogether. Moving on to another one of the special enemy types in this game, one of the creepiest and most tragic, Lisa Trevor. She was abducted and experimented on by Umbrella as a young child, along with her mother, Jessica. The two were exposed to the progenitor virus. Her mother died while Lisa began to develop superhuman abilities from the experiments, most notably regeneration. Lisa was not made aware of her mother's death, however, and Umbrella replaced her with several of its employees, believing Lisa would not notice the difference, having had her mental state compromised due to the effects of the virus. But Lisa would become increasingly more hostile and aggressive towards her captors, escaping from them and cutting off the faces of all her phony mothers, wearing them, and believing they had been stolen from her real mother and had to be returned. Lisa Trevor gives me a lot of Leatherface vibes with how she wears the faces of the people she's killed. All she wants is to be reunited with her mother. It's very sad what Umbrella did to her, though she can be temporarily downed with weapons, similarly to later baddies in the series like Mr. X and Lady Dimitrescu. Due to her regenerative powers, she cannot be killed entirely. All you can really do against her is run like the Dickens, and don't look back. Lisa Trevor's backstory in this game is one of the more memorable and heartbreaking. It just gets under your skin. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this whole story, why everything was set into motion. The main antagonist of this game is the diabolical Albert Wesker. You know he's evil because he wears sunglasses, even at night. What a douche. Wesker is the captain of the Alpha team of the Raccoon City Police Department's STARS unit, and at the beginning of the game, despite having the personality and charisma of a block of wood, he seems like a decent guy, offering you supplies when you need them, and even aiding you in battle against some of the monsters. How much he helps you and where he pops up throughout the game all depends on who you are playing as, Chris or Jill. In the end, Wesker is revealed to be a double agent, a senior researcher who had been working for Umbrella. He had been ordered by his superiors to cover up the outbreak of the T-virus and to lure the STARS agents to the Spencer mansion so they could act as test subjects against Umbrella's genetic monstrosities. The company began gathering the battle data from the encounters it monitored, but Wesker had his own plans for the data, hoping to steal it and sell it to the highest bidder, Umbrella's corporate rivals. To destroy any incriminating evidence against him at the estate, Wesker employs another one of your allies, Barry Burton, whom he blackmails by threatening the lives of his wife and daughter. Barry not only destroys evidence, but helps Wesker track down Enrico Marini, the surviving captain of the STARS Bravo team, who Wesker kills in the underground tunnels. Enrico had learned about Umbrella, the outbreak of a bioweapon they created, and that one of the STARS members was a double agent working for them, so he had to be silenced. Even though Barry sided with the enemy, he was forced to do so in fear of losing his wife and daughter. He obviously doesn't want to do what he's been ordered to do, but has no other choice in the matter. Barry is my favorite side character in this game, and he's one of the more lovable and charming from this entire franchise. He's the real hero of this story, coming to your rescue as Jill more times than I can count. Eventually, he double-crosses Wesker, shooting him in the shoulder, having had enough of his bullshit and stupid sunglasses. Unfortunately, this bullet doesn't kill Wesker though, and in his weakened state, he manages to activate Umbrella's ultimate bioweapon, the Tyrant, an imposing humanoid monster created through a strain of the T-virus and intended to be used on the battlefield as a super soldier for the military, being cloned numerous times, which is a frightening thought. The Tyrant is incredibly powerful, but the one you face in this game is an early model and is incomplete, and due to its mutations, has an exposed heart on the outside of its chest, which is pretty creepy. This heart is its weak point, which you will need to shoot in order to take it down. You end up blowing it to bits with a rocket launcher, which is satisfying as all hell. When the Tyrant is first released from its containment unit, it slowly walks towards you before slashing at the wounded Wesker, seemingly killing him. But after you temporarily down the monster, you discover that Wesker's body has disappeared. It is later revealed that Wesker had been injected with an experimental strain of the T-virus, which gave him superhuman levels of strength, speed, and regeneration, which is why he was able to survive his injuries at the end of Resident Evil 1. Though he would make a few cameos here and there in the following games, Wesker wouldn't fully return until Resident Evil 5 in 2009. I'll share my thoughts on that one in a later video. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the Spencer Mansion, horrors and all. The setting of this game, which takes place primarily in the mansion and the surrounding estate, is the scariest and most unsettling of the entire franchise. I think atmospherically, the first Resident Evil is the strongest of all the games. Its graphics and visuals are also unique compared to the rest of these newer games and remakes, using 3D models over top of pre-rendered backgrounds, just like the original games on the PS1 did. Resident Evil just has an eerie feel to it that's hard to put your finger on. After completing it, it lingered with me for days afterwards, haunting my very soul. I do get that a lot of its gameplay elements are a staple of survival horror games, what many consider to be true survival horror games, but they do still hinder this one in a few areas. I don't like the awkward tank controls, camera, and the growing pains you have with them, the limited saving, the restricted inventory space, leading to lots of backtracking at times, and the maps that don't update with key icons and other collectibles you may have already interacted with, which is kind of annoying, something I found to be really engaging in later games, being able to plan out routes much easier. The gameplay in this one is just not on par with the later RE entries in my opinion. I prefer the faster pace to them, with their first-person or over-the-shoulder perspectives, even though many took a major hit with their atmosphere and overall scares compared to the original. Despite all of its gameplay flaws though, with some aspects being a bit outdated in my opinion, the remake of Resident Evil is still one of my favorites in the franchise, in my top 3 for sure. I think its spooky atmosphere and unique visuals make it a standout in the series, unparalleled by any of the other games. I might not like everything the original Resident Evil has to offer, but I do appreciate and respect its place in the timeline. It was a starting point, where it all began, and in my opinion, it's still one of the better Resident Evil installments, so that's a testament to its quality, even after all these years. I want to thank you very much for watching. I'm curious to see how this video performs, because it's a lot different than most of the other stuff I look at and analyze on this channel. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. If you'd like to help ensure the production of future content like this, you can do so by becoming a producer over on patreon.com/channel NerdGasm. Let me know your thoughts on Resident Evil down in the comments section below. Join in on the discussion. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and always stay nerdy.